Alright, so as I walk over to do this green bean seeds video, you can see that we've got some snow, right? And in general, snow is really good for the landscape because it allows more water to trickle down deeper into the soil profile, right? Because it's not all hitting the ground at once as rain and running off. So it's really good to resaturate the land, especially right here currently, where we're out of a 2-month drought and stuff. So it's really good to recharge that water beneath the ground. Green beans are actually one of my favorite crops to grow. Even though if you're growing food to sell, green beans don't really typically command a high price, and they're just generally not really seen as all that attractive of a food item. Just not super popular, no flashy colors, but nonetheless, for me personally, the green bean is just a fantastic flavor. It's easy to grow. I will be snacking on green beans out in the garden all the time. And while some of the general indifference might be understandable, given that so many green beans in the grocery store are tasteless, tough, fibrous, and not that tasty, homegrown green beans, or even green beans from like a local farmer's market or whatever, have so much more flavor, so much more crisp and fresh, and just an overall really high quality product that tastes fantastic and sweet. And for green beans and beans in general, I always save my own seeds. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the process that I go through to harvest these seeds and store them for planting. So I gotta be honest, initially when I thought of this video about harvesting green bean seeds, I really didn't think that I could say too much about it or that it would be really all that exciting. But as I started writing stuff down and thinking about it, I realized that there's actually a lot more to it than what I initially thought. Sometimes I just assume that tasks are easy and basic, but that's really only because I've been doing that for years, right? And so I tend to overlook the details. But that's until I go back through and rethink and re-examine what I'm doing, and so many more details emerge. So harvesting green bean seeds is super easy, right? The seeds are really large, so they're easy to work with, and the pods are brittle and easy to open up to access the seeds, unlike some other crops. So all I do is I just allow the pods to mature on the vine and let them dry to desiccate before I go in and harvest them, right? Typically when we harvest green beans, we are harvesting an immature bean, right? The seeds aren't fully formed, the pods are green and smaller. So what we do instead is we let those pods to grow and the beans inside to swell to their full color. We'll go through different color changes of the pod from, dark green to a lighter green to like a yellowish, and then to like a tan, and then it'll be like a black and gray if you wait too long. But typically we want to harvest these green bean seeds when they are turning that tan color and the seeds are dry inside. Now of course inclement weather conditions or projected inclement weather conditions can change that, right? So if you have a bunch of seeds that are almost mature but not quite there, but let's say like the pod has turned like going from like yellow to tan, but the seeds are still kind of maybe a little swollen inside, I can still go and harvest those, right? Even if they're not fully dry, and I can let them dry more fully inside my house for a few extra days before I shell them and harvest the seeds. So that works well too. Also, sometimes I do that because other animals, rodents may go after the seeds. So sometimes I may harvest them just slightly immature, not fully desiccated, and I will go in and harvest those and dry those so that I can save the amount of seeds that I want to save. So here we have a Blue Lake bush bean. It is nearing maturity. It hasn't quite dried down yet, but the seed pod has swelled. The seeds within that are really beginning to puff out and harden off. But I'm going to leave this on the plant a few more days so they can kind of finish off that desiccation process as much as possible, but I don't want it to go too far to the point where it begins to like really decompose, or it becomes wet and it rains, and then the seeds begin to sprout or mold or anything like that. But if we look over here at another bean pod, we can kind of see this one's becoming a much more lighter tan. It's dry, just kind of snaps off. It's very like papery, light tan color. It's just beginning to show like surface mold on the pod. This is a good stage to harvest the beans for seed, before the whole pod kind of turns that shriveled gray color. This is ideal. So we can see that this one is still kind of yellowish green, the pod, and hasn't quite dried out to that nice tan color yet. Green beans are essentially the same plant as dry beans. It's just that the green beans have been bred to be different varieties with pods that are less fibrous and a sweeter taste, right? Higher water content in the immature pods. But really, these mature beans can theoretically be used the same as any other dry bean, right? In terms of like eating them. So again, once those pods are ideally fully dry or just about fully dry on the plant, I will go in and harvest them, and I will take them inside, spread them out on a well-ventilated surface, right? I like to use old screen doors because it's just got that mesh screening. Maybe I'll put some boards underneath that screen door to help support the weight, like in the middle. But that's really good for like good air, getting airflow from underneath and all around. So I'll spread those pods out. I'll let them dry a few days, and until they're like that crispy dry, you can feel them in your hand. Usually that process takes about 1 to 3 days. It might depend on the temperature and humidity conditions in the house or wherever you are drying your beans. And then I will take those dried pods and I will shell them, right? Ideally, we want to do it in a well-ventilated area, right? Because it can be kind of dusty and not really that great to inhale those particles. So if you can do them outside, or you set up a fan with where you're shelling these beans, that would be good. And then once I have shelled the beans, I will let them dry a few more days on that screen door, right? I'll put them back on that screen door, spread them out, and let them just to fully dry, just in case there's any residual moisture still hanging around. And then that chaff, right, the pods that I had taken the seeds out from, those pods I can take back and I can put them in the compost, right? Now I would add them as brown material then, right? Because they're fully dried and they don't have the seeds in them, right? The seeds are the protein-rich nitrogen source. So if I were to add seeds, like any bad or damaged seeds to the compost, that would be green material, right? High nitrogen. But the pods, because they're dried, they have a very high carbon concentration, so those would be added in as brown material. Or you can add them in as like a mulch to like other garden beds, especially where maybe legumes are not really growing. And they can act as a pretty good mulch for some other crops that I grow too. Then once those seeds have dried, usually what I'll do is I'll store them in like glass jars or other containers with lids, and I'll let them overwinter in those nice kind of dry conditions. And then of course I'll get them back out in spring and for planting. Now the one thing is you want to be careful of pantry moths. They can get into bean seed stocks sometimes, and they can chew their way through a bunch of beans and cause issues. So that's one thing to be mindful of. If pantry moths may be an issue in your area, just be aware. Now I don't have it on here, but my favorite variety to grow is of course the Blue Lake bush bean. I've kind of mentioned this type of green bean in some other videos, but it's pretty much a classic green bean. I know a lot of people I know will grow the provider bean, but I like the flavor of the Blue Lake bush bean. Some people grow pole beans. I think there's a Blue Lake pole variety, but I really like the bush style for my context. I think the bush varieties tend to bear fruit or food sooner, and they can be a little easier to work with and not necessarily quite so much set up with like trellis systems. And so really for me, the bush varieties are just easier to work with. But you do have to take into consideration that if you are storing your own seed, that the bush varieties are producing seed, but they're going to be closer to the ground, so that can be a more higher moisture rather than higher up in the air. So you want to make sure that you're being mindful and getting out there to harvest as soon as those pods are, dry enough to harvest, because you don't want to let them wait too long, because then they can sprout, and then of course you can't use those for planting. So thank you so much for checking out this video on harvesting and storing green bean seeds. Basically, anyone who has a garden and grows green beans can save their own seeds. And overall, they are really easy to collect and store, and each year we save our own seeds, we are harvesting plants that are successively better adapted to our landscape. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.